Rain tapped softly against the windshield, each drop blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and gray. She sat in her car, motionless, hands gripping the steering wheel though the engine had been off for 10 minutes. Her name was Aaliyah, and this was the third rejection email she'd read that week. "We appreciate your interest, but we've decided to move forward with another candidate." The words stung, though she'd seen them so many times they'd almost lost meaning almost. She scrolled back through the message again, searching for something, a hint, a reason, anything that explained why she wasn't enough. But there was nothing. Just a polite ending and her name misspelled at the bottom. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from her landlord: "Rent is overdue. Please make payment by Friday." Aaliyah exhaled, the sound catching in her throat. It was only Tuesday, but she already knew Friday would come fast, and she didn't have the money. Not this time. She leaned back in the seat, staring out at the world beyond her car window, people hurrying through the rain, umbrellas up, lives moving forward while hers seemed stuck in place. It wasn't supposed to be this way. She had done everything right. The late night studying. The double shifts. The endless job applications. She'd followed every rule they said would lead to success. But somehow, success never seemed to recognize her face. And maybe it wasn't just her qualifications. Maybe it was her. Her dark skin. Her natural hair. The way she spoke, confident but never quite corporate enough. She'd been told to tone it down more times than she could count. Smile softer. Speak slower. Straighten her hair. Be more approachable. Each word, each piece of advice, had chipped away at something inside her until she started to wonder if maybe they were right. The rain grew heavier. The air inside the car felt thick. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and closed her eyes. In the silence, memories started to play like an old film reel. Her mother's voice. "You're going to change the world one day, baby girl. Don't let them tell you different." Her grandmother's hands rough from years of work braiding her hair and whispering prayers under her breath. And then the voice from her first interview out of college. "You're smart, Aaliyah, but maybe try to sound a little less emotional next time." That one stuck. Because she had been emotional, passionate, hopeful, human. But the world didn't seem to want that from her. Aaliyah lifted her head and caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were tired, ringed with sleepless nights and silent tears. But behind them there was something else. A flicker. A quiet refusal. "No," she whispered to herself. "Not like this." She opened her laptop, still sitting in the driver's seat. The same rejection email glowed on the screen. But this time, she didn't stare at it in defeat. She clicked reply. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard, then began to move. "Thank you for your response," she typed, "but I'd like to know what I can improve for the future. I believe I have more to offer, and I'm determined to get better." It wasn't anger. It wasn't begging. It was power, quiet, controlled, unshakable power. She sent it. Then she closed her laptop and leaned back again, a small, weary smile forming on her face. The rain slowed to a drizzle. The world outside her window felt a little clearer. Maybe she didn't have the perfect job, or the perfect plan, or the perfect life. But she still had her voice. And she was done letting other people silence it. That night, when she finally drove home, her small apartment felt different, not bigger, not brighter, but more hers. She brewed a cup of tea and sat at her desk, pulling out a notebook. On the first page, she wrote one sentence. "I will turn my pain into power." The words looked shaky at first, like she didn't quite believe them. But she traced over them again and again until they grew bold. And then she started writing more. Everything she'd been through, the rejections, the disappointments, the loneliness. She wrote it all down, not to wallow in it, but to own it. to see it clearly for what it was, fuel. When she finally went to bed, she felt lighter than she had in months. The pain was still there, but it had changed shape, no longer a weight, but a spark. Before drifting off, she whispered to herself, "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." And somewhere in the quiet, the universe seemed to whisper back, "Yes, it is." The sun rose weakly through her window the next morning, slipping between the blinds and landing across the open pages of Aaliyah's notebook. The words from the night before stared back at her: "I will turn my pain into power." For the first time in a long while, the sentence didn't feel like a desperate wish. It felt like a decision. She got out of bed slowly, the ache of exhaustion still clinging to her bones. There was no sudden burst of motivation, no soundtrack swelling in the background, just a quiet, steady knowing that something had to change. No one was coming to save her. No miracle email was going to arrive. This, whatever this was, would have to start with her. She poured herself a cup of coffee, opened her laptop again, and looked at the half-finished resume that had been haunting her for weeks. She didn't touch it. Not today. Instead, she opened a blank document and typed one word at the top: story. She wasn't sure why, but writing had always felt like breathing to her. Words were the one thing she had always had, even when everything else seemed to fall apart. So she wrote. She wrote about growing up in a world that didn't see her. About being told to straighten her curls for professionalism. About teachers who said she was too bold. About the interviews where they smiled politely and said, "We'll be in touch." She wrote until her fingers hurt, until tears blurred the keyboard. By the time she looked up, hours had passed. The coffee had gone cold. But she felt alive again, cracked open, but alive. Later that night, she scrolled through her phone and opened social media, something she usually avoided. It was filled with people posting their wins, promotions, new cars, vacations, perfect smiles. But somewhere between the polished posts and perfect captions, she found something else: a short video of a woman talking about her struggles. Raw. Honest. No filters. The woman's voice shook as she said, "You don't have to have it all together to start. Sometimes, starting broken is the bravest thing you'll ever do." Aaliyah froze. Her heart thudded. That was it, that was what she'd been missing. Not perfection. Not the right time. Just the courage to start as she was. She opened her notes app and copied one paragraph from her writing, just a few sentences about rejection and hope. She hesitated. Her thumb hovered over the post button for what felt like an eternity. What if people didn't care? What if they laughed? What if she looked foolish? But then she remembered all the times she'd silenced herself for the comfort of others and decided she was done living small. She hit post. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a like. A comment. Another like. Someone wrote, "I needed this today. Thank you." A tiny, trembling smile broke across her face. It wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about followers. It was about connection, that invisible thread that ties one human heart to another through shared pain and shared hope. Over the next few weeks, she started posting more. Little pieces of her journey. Honest reflections. Lessons learned through failure. Some days, 5 people watched. Other days, 50. But each message mattered. One night, she got a message from a young woman named Nia. "I saw your video about rejection. I cried. I just got turned down for my dream job, and I was ready to give up. But hearing your story made me believe I still have a chance." Aaliyah read it twice. Then 3 times. Her throat tightened. This was what she'd been searching for all along. Not validation. Not applause. Purpose. Still, it wasn't easy. There were nights she questioned everything. Nights she cried again, wondering if she was really changing anything at all. But every time doubt crept in, she remembered that moment in her car, the rain, the rejection, the quiet promise she'd made to herself. She refused to go back. So she began to treat her story like work. She set a schedule: post every 3 days. Write something meaningful each morning. Learn how to edit, how to film, how to tell stories that heal instead of just impress. Her living room slowly transformed into a studio, a small tripod by the window, a thrift store lamp for lighting, a notebook filled with ideas taped to the wall. The first time she recorded herself speaking directly to the camera, her voice trembled. She hated the way she looked, the way her words stumbled. She almost deleted the whole thing, but then she remembered something her grandmother used to say. Even shaky hands can build something strong. So she kept it. She posted it. And this time, something different happened. Hundreds of comments. Thousands of views. People from all over the world shared her video. This made me cry. Thank you for being real. I felt this in my soul. Aaliyah stared at the screen, overwhelmed. All those nights she'd thought no one saw her, and now, her voice was reaching strangers across the world. She realized something powerful in that moment: her pain wasn't a weakness, it was a bridge. Every story she told, every truth she shared, built that bridge a little wider, allowing others to cross from despair to hope. And as she sat there in the glow of her laptop screen, she whispered again the same words she'd written weeks ago. I will turn my pain into power. Only this time, she didn't need to convince herself. She already had. It started with a single message. Then a few more. And soon, Aaliyah's inbox was full of voices, people she'd never met, sharing stories that sounded a lot like her own. Your videos got me through this week. I'm learning to believe in myself again. I showed your story to my daughter, she said she wants to be like you. Each message felt like a heartbeat. Proof that her pain had become something living, something that breathed hope into others. Her phone buzzed constantly now. New comments. New shares. Her following was growing, but it didn't feel like fame, it felt like family. A quiet community built from courage and vulnerability. Every morning, before the world woke up, she'd sit by her window with her tea and her notebook, the same one that once held her fears, and she'd write. Not for perfection. Not for numbers. For healing. Her videos changed, too. The nervousness faded. Her words carried more weight, her voice, more certainty. She spoke about rejection, self-worth, identity, and healing. And though her topics were simple, her truth made them powerful. People didn't just hear her. They felt her. One night, after posting a video about resilience, she went to bed as usual. When she woke up, her phone was flooded. Over 1 million views. Tens of thousands of comments. She blinked at the numbers, unable to process them. Her heart pounded as she scrolled. People were sharing her words across continents: teachers in Ghana, nurses in London, students in Atlanta. Even celebrities had reposted her clip, calling it a message the world needed. Aaliyah sat there in stunned silence. For a moment, she thought back to that night in her car: the rain, the rejection, the quiet whisper that told her not to give up. She laughed softly through tears. Look at God, she said under her breath. But with growth came pressure. Suddenly, everyone wanted something from her: collaborations, interviews, partnerships. Brands began emailing her, offering deals she'd once dreamed about. Yet part of her hesitated. She didn't want to become just another influencer chasing trends. Her story was sacred, and she vowed to protect its authenticity, no matter how bright the spotlight became. So she said no more often than she said yes. She turned down offers that didn't align with her message. She chose truth over clicks, purpose over profit. That integrity became her signature. People trusted her because she wasn't performing, she was living her story, one honest word at a time. And slowly, she began to see the deeper purpose in all of it. The platform wasn't about her, it was about the people who saw themselves in her. The young black woman afraid to apply for her dream job. The single mother trying to rebuild her life. The girl learning to love the reflection in her mirror. They were the real story. She was just the voice reminding them they were not alone. Months passed. Her videos became talks. Her talks became workshops. And soon, she was standing on a small stage at a local community center, microphone in hand, heart pounding. Dozens of faces watched her, waiting for her to speak. She took a deep breath and began. When I started sharing my story, I was scared. I thought my pain made me weak. But what I've learned is that our scars are not shame, they are proof we survived. Silence filled the room, not the empty kind, but the kind that listens. People nodded, tears glistening in their eyes. When she finished, they stood and clapped, not because she was famous, but because she was real. Afterward, an older woman approached her, holding her hand tightly. "You remind me of my younger self," she said. "Back then, I didn't have anyone telling me I could make it. Keep doing what you're doing, baby. The world needs it." Aaliyah smiled through tears. In that moment, she realized she had become what she once needed. Her success wasn't in the numbers or applause. It was in these quiet moments of recognition. The way strangers saw her and said, "Me too." Still, some nights she found herself alone, staring out the same window where it all began. Fame hadn't erased the pain, it had only reshaped it. But now, instead of letting it bury her, she used it to lift others. And each time doubt whispered, because doubt always came back, she'd go back to that first page of her notebook, tracing the faded ink with her fingertips. "I will turn my pain into power." She smiled softly, whispering to herself. And now, that power is helping others find theirs. By the end of the year, she had spoken at schools, women's groups, and conferences. She'd been featured in magazines, podcasts, and panels, all for sharing the story that once made her feel small. She wasn't just telling her truth anymore. She was living her transformation, a testament that even the darkest stories can become light for someone else. Her mother watched one of her talks online and called her afterward, crying. "You did it, baby," she said. "You turned it around." Aaliyah laughed through tears. "No, Mama," she whispered. "We did." And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was chasing something. She felt like she was walking in her purpose. The rise wasn't just about reaching new heights. It was about finally standing tall on ground she built herself, brick by brick, truth by truth, pain by power. The auditorium lights were low, and the room hummed with quiet anticipation. Hundreds of faces looked toward the stage, students, mothers, professionals, dreamers, all waiting for her. Aaliyah stood backstage, clutching the same notebook she had carried since the beginning. Its pages were worn, corners folded, ink faded. But inside it lived her entire story, every tear, every failure, every prayer. She took a deep breath. The same nervous flutter she once felt before hitting post years ago returned, not fear, but awe. She smiled. "God," she whispered, "thank you for not letting me quit." The host called her name. The applause rose like a wave. She stepped into the light. It had been 3 years since that rainy night in her car. 3 years since rejection had nearly broken her. 3 years since she'd written the words, "I will turn my pain into power." Now, she was living proof of that promise. Her voice carried through the microphone, calm but fierce. "I used to think power meant being perfect. That strength meant never falling apart. But I've learned that real power, the kind that changes lives, comes from being brave enough to show your cracks." The audience was still. You could almost hear hearts beating. She continued. "I stand here not because I never failed, but because I did over and over. And every failure taught me how to rise. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd, a shared recognition. People weren't just listening to her story. They were seeing themselves in it. She spoke for nearly an hour, weaving laughter, vulnerability, and truth into every sentence. She told them about the rejections, the fear, the nights of doubt. But she also told them about the moment she stopped waiting for permission, the moment she decided to begin anyway. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. When she said her final words, "Turn your pain into power. Because you were never meant to stay broken," the audience stood as one, clapping, cheering, crying. It wasn't fame. It was connection. It was healing. Later that evening, after the crowd had left and the stage was empty, Aaliyah sat alone in one of the front rows. The lights were dim again, and the quiet wrapped around her like an old friend. Her phone buzzed, another message. This one from a teenage girl named Maya. "I watched your talk tonight. I was going to drop out of school next week. But after hearing your story, I think I'll give myself one more chance." Aaliyah stared at the message for a long moment, tears welling up again. Then she smiled, that same small, trembling smile she had years ago when her first video got its first comment. She whispered, "That's why. That was always the why. Not the fame. Not the followers. The one person on the edge, deciding to keep going." As months passed, her mission grew. She founded a nonprofit that offered workshops for young Black women teaching storytelling, confidence, and leadership. She called it the Power Project. The first session had 5 women in a borrowed library room. Now, hundreds attended across cities. Each time, she would tell them, "Your voice is your weapon. Don't let anyone silence it, not even your own doubt." She watched as women who once whispered now spoke boldly. As young girls who once hid now stood tall. As broken hearts began to heal just as hers once did. And every time she saw one of them rise, she felt that spark again, that same fire that began in a parked car on a rainy night. The world still wasn't easy. There were still critics, still trolls, still days where she wanted to disappear. But she had learned that power wasn't the absence of pain, it was the refusal to let pain define the ending. One evening, she returned home after a long trip. Her mother had cooked dinner, the kind of meal that tasted like love and memory. After they ate, her mother reached across the table, holding her hand. "You've done good, baby," she said softly. "But more than that, you've made people believe again. Your grandma would be proud." Aaliyah smiled through tears. "I just told the truth, Mama." Her mother shook her head gently. "No, baby. You lived the truth." They sat in silence, warmth between them. Later that night, Aaliyah went to her room and opened that same old notebook one more time. The first page still read, "I will turn my pain into power." She added a new line beneath it. "And I will help others do the same." Then she closed it and placed it on her nightstand, not as a reminder of what she survived, but as a symbol of what she became. Outside, the city glowed softly against the night sky, lights flickering like quiet prayers. Aaliyah stood by the window, looking out at the world that had once felt too big for her dreams. She wasn't that woman in the car anymore. She was the voice she once needed to hear. And her power, her story, was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough. She smiled to herself, whispering the words that had carried her through it all. This is what healing looks like. This is what power feels like. And somewhere in the quiet, you could almost hear the universe reply, "Well done."